We're born into this world with a game board in front of us. Across the table, playing the opposing side, is the spirit of the society that we're born into. We're told from a very young age that in order to win this game, we need to succeed in what society expects from us. Whether this means getting good grades so that we can get a good career, making money to buy a house, or getting married to someone desirable and having kids. The instructions vary depending on which society we're born into. One thing that remains the same, however, is that from a very young age, we are told to focus the majority of our attention on the specific game in front of us. For over a decade, this is all we are instructed to think about. But truth be told, this game is not the most important. You see, there is another game going on above you. A game played by giants on a much larger scale. One that determines the fate of entire nations and their people. A game that determines your very survival and also how enjoyable of a life you will likely live. This is the grand game. The grand game is a game that we often hear whispers about as we go about our lives. It's a game played by the giants of the world, people, groups, and ideas with huge amounts of influence and power, capable of moving giant chess pieces around the giant's board. The giants here are playing against each other. What's at stake is more power. This is something that's always been the case and probably will be for a long time. Now, why does any of this matter? Well, there are two reasons why this game is important. Two reasons why you must pay attention. Reason number one, getting crushed. You and I, we're essentially tiny little ants on this giant chessboard. If we don't pay attention, if we don't look up, there's a pretty high chance that we'll eventually get crushed by the giant pieces moving around. This might mean losing your job and your savings due to a shift in the economy, losing your home because of a natural disaster, or being stuck in a war-torn country with no way out. Some might say that thinking like this serves no purpose, that one should avoid negative news and just focus on the things in front of us for the sake of our happiness. But this is something that I strongly disagree with. If you choose to ignore the signs, if you don't challenge your existing beliefs about the world and look up, you won't be able to move out of the way. You won't be able to switch up your strategy. The giants are constantly moving their pieces. Just because it's been peaceful on a particular square does not mean that nothing will ever happen. In fact, the only thing you can guarantee in life is that things do happen. Now, I understand that reading the news can really screw with one's mood. It can lead to anxiety or depression. If this is the case, there are two things you can do. Firstly, instead of looking at the horrific details, just read the headlines. And instead of reading the headlines every day, just do it once a month or even once every 2 months. There are basically 4 things to keep track of. What's happening in the economy, what's happening to nations nearby, what's happening to the supply chain, things like energy and food, and what's happening with the climate. Alternatively, you can find people who don't feel anxiety looking up and check in with them every once in a while for a brief summary. Some sources I refer to are people on YouTube like Peter Zeihan and the subreddit r/geopolitics. When you realize one of the giants is about to make a move that could potentially crush you, it's time to switch up your strategy and move squares. Whether this means thinking about a new career path, moving your investments, stocking up on supplies, or even actually relocating yourself and your loved ones. Now, don't let this bum you out too much because there is a bright side to all of this. You see, the second reason why we must pay attention to the grand game is because we want to figure out which giant is winning. Why? Well, if you can position yourself on the winning giant's side, you'll be able to reap the benefits of the winner. You'll avoid getting crushed. Your wealth will multiply and your standard of living will definitely be higher than those on the squares of the losing giant. Let's take, for example, a battle that I've been following closely. The battle between the decentralized and centralized giants. The world of crypto, NFTs, and DeFi versus the current system that we have now. Centralized banks, paper money, and government. These two giants have been duking it out on the battlefield for the past decade. At first, it seemed like the centralized giant was certain to win. People said things like, they'll just ban Bitcoin. They would never allow it to grow big enough to be a threat. But had you sided with the decentralized giant, if you moved a small fraction of your wealth onto its squares in something truly decentralized like Bitcoin, your wealth would have multiplied many times over. Now, neither side is guaranteed a win. As we can see, crypto is currently not doing well at all. But it's an ongoing battle, and no one knows for certain who the winner will be. But there are definitely signs that you would have caught if you simply looked up, and there will be many more signs to come. Now, don't get me wrong. The game in front of you is still very important. It is something that you should spend the majority of your time on, but you should challenge your existing beliefs and look up every once in a while to avoid getting crushed. Because remember, the only thing certain in life is that the giants will continue to play their game, which means things will always change.